To start, can you introduce yourself for the recording?
My name is Nancy Burns. I'm the Stoddard Curator of Print Drawings and Photographs at the Worcester Art Museum.
All right. Nice to meet you, Nancy.
You too?
And um, in general, we'll get more into more detail, but
Okay.
just just kind of feeling you out a bit. What would you like? What would you say is your feeling on AI art being copyrighted? Like, can AI would it, if I like say I make an image on Dolly and I post that?
Mhm.
Who owns the copyright there? Who do you think should own the copyright? We're not interested. We're not looking for law. We're looking for your opinion.
Well, I feel like you have a couple questions there, so I'm gonna
We'll get into more detail.
you were asking, okay? So first of all, what are my feelings about AI and art? My feeling is to try not to be reactive and conservative. Um, I think this idea of copyright and ownership and objecthood, this revisits a lot of the issues that you found with the kind of end game of conceptual work and performative work that was being done in the 1960s and 70s. So wall drawings by Saul LeWitt, for example, it was like, here's some instructions, and that was it. And what would it mean for someone to own a set of instructions? And for the moment that was made, that was kind of the end game of how much can I commodify not making an actual thing, and play with that problem and the issue of ownership. And so a lot of people had a lot of problems with that then. They thought that was ridiculous. And we look back now and see it as like an important generative shift in how we think about what constitutes an art object. So, how do I feel about some like AI thing generating its own artwork? Um, I I have no problem with that. I'm like incredibly interested in seeing where that goes. My concern, however, is the idea of authorship being something that's not, the idea of something being original is lost when everything, to a certain degree, if everything's built out of existing data sets. So when you have the idea of creating something different and new or offering new scholarships and new takes on things becomes really problematic when everything's regurgitation of something that's already extant. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if you're, in terms of who has the copyright of those things, if you're trying to create a new Saul LeWitt, which would actually be kind of great because he was already trying to create something that wasn't a real object, I kind of think that if it's birthed entirely out of content that was already done by Saul LeWitt, then Saul LeWitt has the copyright on it.
Okay.
That's what I think. The issue becomes, let's say you ask it to generate a work that's the like mashup of like 200 different artists. Then my answer is I don't know. I don't feel like the field, or we haven't had to really confront that yet. So I don't really have a good answer for that. I also don't understand copyright law.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but based off of your first scenario, in the second scenario, the problem is that all of those hundreds of people have some level of claim to it.
No, because we don't actually know that the data set pulled from all of them. We could offer like, we have the option of here's 100 different artists. We don't know what percentage got pulled from one person, or if it got used, or what it's considering is stylistically tied to one person versus something that's like conceptually universal to the group. So then how would you assign that?
Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns here.
Yeah, so as a result, when you don't have an author, a clear author, the idea of how copyright could even be assigned becomes a challenge. That doesn't mean that collectives haven't made like collective works before, but I think that there's like um, there's agency present when a collective produces a work together, or when collaborations happen, and the agency of choosing to participate in a collective construction isn't there.
I see.
Yeah, the other issue with the soloist is, like, you know how with music, for example, that they'll use like a song for like a political rally that's by Bruce Springsteen or Neil Young or something, and they're like, stop using my song.
Yep.
But it's possible that they got permission from the record album that has, like, how much creative control does the artist?
They don't the artist doesn't necessarily have the copyright ownership.
So how much control do you have over your intellectual content?
Yeah, because like if you post something on like Twitter, doesn't like Twitter technically own that? Twitter doesn't exist, but don't mind that. That's not important right now.
I actually don't know.
Okay. I'm pretty sure that like when you post something on social media, you don't own the post anymore. But like neither, I don't know. It's okay. Whatever. It's point is, I see what you mean when you say that like there's nuance here.
Yeah, because also Solowit might say, I don't want you doing any AI work. I will not sign off on you calling any of that my work. And then it's like, well, you might, like, I don't know, maybe it is anyway. Like, I don't know how much of one's intellectual product still belongs to them. That said, we have certainly people like scholars who have introduced ideas, and scholarship is something where like we build off of other people's ideas, and if you credit them, I don't have to pay an author every single time I refer to their essay or their article, but I do acknowledge that this idea that I'm responding to came from another source. But if I do want to reproduce enough of it, then I do have to get permission. So there's like gradations of how much can be a nod and how much has to be
the whole fair use thing.
There you go.
That makes sense. So you mentioned how there's like a gray area when it comes to AI that's pulling from several different sources, right? Earlier. Does that gray area apply when a human does that?
So like I looked at lots of different exhibition catalogs and lots of different research when I created the checklist for an exhibition. Is that what you're saying? Or like
say you're not an artist, but say you were. You've looked at a lot of other people's paintings, and then that has inspired you to make your painting.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that kind of analogous? Or if it's not, why isn't it?
Let's see. I think that you're tapping into like a foundational nature versus nurture question.
I very much am.
Of something that's been.
Hang on, your voice popped out for a second. Could you repeat that?
The entire time that human beings have been sentient. But I think that it's like crazy to think that all artwork is in some ways the product of being responsive to one's environment, whether it be that you're being responsive to, like, I lived in a cave and only ate Kentucky Fried Chicken for my entire life, and therefore it had a huge impact on the work I made, or that I went to museums every single weekend through my whole childhood, and like through osmosis, like I was impacted in these ways. I don't think that it's the same as AI, because there is the personal experience that gets mediated through the influences, as opposed to like a neutral data set, which is not about so much about mediating an experience, or it's not reflective in the way that someone who's appropriating material or influenced by other material is, because it's always vis-a-vis their own experience.
What exactly do you mean by that? Like, how's an AI reading all the data about a picture any different from a human experiencing that picture? Can you say that the AI is experiencing the picture?
In which the data set.
Sorry, stop. Sorry. You cut the audio is cutting in and out. I'll give it a second. Okay, now try.
Because the context in which that information is experienced is the same always for the AI, and it is different for the person. So my experience of seeing what is leading the people and what I bring to it when I go to the Louvre and see Delacroix is definitely different from either of you, and certainly different because of the identity and life experiences that other people bring from different places. Chat GPT or whatever is always bringing the same neutral experience to anything. And so it's not the same, because it's not, yeah, that's why I say it's not the same, because there's we bring our individual identities to every single thing that we engage with.
Okay. This is pure this is a pure speculation question. It's fine if you don't have an opinion, but do you think that future AIs could be different in this sense?
So
can 5 or 6
have like life experience, like
obviously AI don't live a life, but they could simulate effectively. They could get the same effect potentially, hypothetically, like, or not.
Become like psychologically dysfunctional. Let's see. Do I think that could happen in the future? I mean, I couldn't have imagined that the internet would exist when I was a kid, and how, like, of course, I think that that's very possible, but
okay.
It's beyond.
You don't see how.
Understanding of when it would happen.
That is completely fair. Okay. So in general, or as a curator, would you be supportive of like displaying AI art in the museum?
I would be, yes. On the condition that I actually understood what I had. Like,
okay.
I think that a lot of NFTs I've seen are really stupid, but I don't care about stupid. Like, that's not my job to care about that. My job is to build a collection and not have taste drive, but rather to think about, what I think belongs in a space like this. But what I haven't seen any NFTs really that I find compelling enough to be pursuing. But beyond that, I don't understand entirely what it is the museum would be acquiring. With a Saul LeWitt, it might seem ridiculous, but I do get that I'm getting this piece of paper that has instructions that other people can't use unless they get permission from me. But with the NFT, I don't understand what actually is owned. And until that issue is resolved to a degree that I understand and feel comfortable with, I don't think that I would acquire artificial AI art until I felt good about that. Because the thing is, like, I don't want to end up in a situation where, because I didn't understand the non-object, the virtual object, that we would get sued for non-compliance, that we would display something in a way that was deemed inappropriate. Like, all of these things I need to know how we can use the object to be able to have.
Okay. One thing, just to make sure I'm understanding your criteria, uh, if the one thing that we could potentially do, I think there's examples of this in the real world, but it definitely is possible. You could have an AI hooked up to a 3D printer, and therefore they'd make an actual physical sculpture.
Mhm.
Would something like that ease your concerns?
Totally. I'd be totally into that. Be totally
Okay.
like, because as long as I know what I mean, I feel like that's like already exists.
Okay.
But again, as long as I know the copyright, I'm like completely fine with doing AI generated art. I mean, I kind of look forward to it.
Oh, so it has nothing to do with the or hang on. Just to make sure it's not about the physicality.
No,
If
it's not physicality.
it's
No,
about the copyright, it's about the ambiguous copyright.
it's about usage. It's about like knowing very clearly what we have.
Okay,
I don't
so
know if it's like only lives on the internet, but I need to know what we have and like what kind of permissions we need and what kind of permissions other people need with us, with us.
okay. Um, so one thing is that because of how automated AI is, if we are letting AI work be treated like human work, ambigu copyright ambiguity aside, wouldn't that drive down the price of these pieces?
I mean, NFTs were like how much for? I mean, it's GameStop. I don't know. I mean, it's. I think
Okay, that's fair. You're not an economist.
Um, I think that this whole enterprise is about challenging a lot of fundamental ideas about capitalism, and I think that that's part of what makes it interesting to me. Is I'm very interested in the economic implications and the idea of challenging um, ownership. And I like things that challenge the nature of museums. Like I'm all in on that. But um, do I care? No. Like to your question, I really don't care.
Okay. Could you elaborate more on what you meant by like challenging the assumptions of capitalism or whatever?
So, you have someone like Saul. I keep going to Saul Witt because he's just like a really easy example. He like, how much can I not give you and still, and it's like, how much can I make this an abstract thing that's not an artwork, but it's an artwork? Performance artists were trying to do this. So you have someone like Vito Acconci, who will do some performance on a pier in New York, and he'll like write about what the performance was, but it's like, but there's no thing. Like it's just an event. You can't commodify this. And of course you can, because people do that and they take photographs of
Videos.
or they videotape the performance. And guess what? That becomes the object that stands in for the performance. And the thing I buy for the collection
Mhm.
are the performance documents. So somehow people are going to find a way to make this thing that is virtual a thing. I guarantee it, because our market demands it, our capitalism demands it, and
And our
because
technology allows it.
it's a product. Even if the product is this video right now, and unfortunately you recorded it, but like let's say you didn't record it and it just kind of it ended and blah blah, people would find a way to make this a thing. So I don't remember what the original question is, but again, I'm confident that society, the market, whatever, will find a way to make this a thing, and therefore, like, embrace capitalism once again. Like, no matter how many times you try to, it'll find a way.
All right. Let's see.
Yeah, performance documents are like a shadow of the thing that originally happened, but they're something you can buy. So you're like buying a moment in time. You're buying like a document of the past. Because we find a way.
So in the same way that you're like buying like that moment in time, like you'd say that like that's like the same thing as like buying like a generated like type of art piece because
I don't know that it's the same. I'm speaking to the art in the past that's tried to challenge the market and capitalism and ownership by extension. And I think AI, that's part of the, the people striking in, writers striking. This idea that they no longer will have residuals that they're getting from things, even if their style of writing is being used to create other things, or their appearance as an actor is being generated and used for other things.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like the anxiety here isn't just like, I'm afraid I'm not going to like it. It's the market. It's money. It always comes down to money. So,
It's funny you mentioned the writer's strike. Yeah, because it just ended, and one of the terms was about AI and how the writers do not want AI being used unless it's explicit and they sign up on it.
and also, if they sign off on it, I guarantee the issue is also going to be, I want to still get a residual if you're using, the market will find a way to address this issue.
Of course.
right. So given like what you're saying about the market, do you think like since there's like a lot of demand for art and it's just so much easier to like generate like art pieces rather than have someone like make it or like pay for a commission or something like that, how do you think like it affects like being an artist or like other creative careers? Like you think like less people would like want to enter the career if there's not like as much room for them to like be part of it, and like people who are currently like in the industry, does it like kind of start to push them out of it?
I think that the problem with AI generated art or creative work, whether like my work, it's not that it'll be bad necessarily. And again, I'm trying to be open-minded. I think that AI can probably produce some incredibly interesting things that it'll be like, oh, this is fascinating. But it is always building itself from something that's already there. Like, this is what I think is ultimately a difference is, what would it mean for AI to generate new approaches? What would it mean for new perspectives or new scholarship or new, it's, yes, it's a 100% responsive product. And I do think that is the one thing that's going to inhibit AI as being something across the board. You'll have some, but I think you'll have a lot of really crappy AI work. Have you seen the Nasher show?
The Nash?
Yeah, hold on. I'm going to send you some links because I reminded myself of this
Okay.
before this meeting. The Nasher Museum at Duke University, they let Chat GPT do an exhibition for their collection. And they had a lot of responses, and there are ways in which I think that kind of more neutral perspective actually can generate some interesting intersections that people wouldn't have thought of. But there are a lot of errors that were built out of it too, and it ended up using a lot of kind of cliche language. And I think that you'll have a lot of bad AI art, and therefore human generated art is actually really refreshing.
Okay. By the way, just for the audience, so there's this idea called death of the author. I'm sure you've heard of it, but just in case anyone watching this later hasn't, I didn't hear anything you just said.
Sorry, death of the author has been going on forever. Art is dead has been going on forever.
Oh yeah, for sure. But basically the idea is there's when you're examining a work like a book, you can try and determine what does the book say, or you can try and determine what does the author want the book to say. Death of the author is the idea that once the work is written, it doesn't matter what the author's opinion is. They're just one more perspective among others. Bringing it back to our main topic, do you think would you take a death of the author approach to AI work with AI not being a perspective and therefore its work just is?
Okay. Do I buy into death of the author? I'm kind of into death of the author. I feel like, and that's from a curatorial perspective, I like to honor any stipulation an artist has about their work. So if they have stipulations that they express about how they want it displayed, if they have stipulations on how long it's displayed, whatever, what kind of screen they want it projected on. As long as I know that, I will do absolutely everything. I will add it to the acquisition file, I'll make it clear, and I will make sure that those things happen. But unless you stipulate something, I don't think you get to call foul if you don't like something.
Yeah. So like
an interpretation, you don't like display, you don't get to call foul on it. So, you know, I do feel in a lot of ways, once you put it out there, you've put it out there and that's it. With AI, my concern is that if you put out a Solowit and Solowit didn't put it out, then Solowit was never given the opportunity to offer even any kind of conditions, disclaimers, whatever, intention on how, it was never given the opportunity to offer an intention of how something was meant to be experienced or seen. And I do think that that's a big difference. You can fail to offer and stipulate.
Of course.
You are in a position to do that as an artist who's crafting something themselves.
Okay.
This is all very weird. I've not thought about a lot of these things before.
Most people haven't. You're not alone.
Yeah.
But that's what we're doing this for.
Yeah.
Sure. Hopefully people will hear these and start thinking about these questions themselves.
Yeah, so we don't want to keep you too long, but just one last thing I wanted to ask. It's like since like all these AI like art generators are like taking like the styles from like existing like works, you think like anyway it could like homogenize like creative works? Because like a lot of times like with like music, for example, like someone comes into the industry and like creates like a new style and it's like a new like trend in music, but like with AI, it's not really like innovating as much. If it's like sampling from previous works, do you think there's like any like risk like all the works just becoming the same over time?
I think that AI has the potential to become the auto-tune of art, which is it will be able to produce something that like could be like good to the ear, but it will be homogenized in a lot of ways. So let's say you have like 10 different programs try to write a I don't know, a Steinbeck novel. They might be some really interesting like narrative threads in there, but it's very likely that they're going to be somewhat hackneyed. They're going to, as a group, keep kind of pulling from the same things. And it will have that kind of auto-tune vibe. On the other hand, one thing I think that AI will be able to do that is interesting is it's not inhibited by an individual's experience. It's not inhibited by like how the class in which I was raised, the access to education that I had or someone else didn't have. In that sense, because it's liberated of all of those things, I think it has the opportunity to actually create some things that are very important for us to be reflecting on. That here, look, we put all this stuff in the universe, and this is what is being pushed back to us. What does that say about what we are creating? Why we're creating what we're creating? What is dominating conversation about this versus things that are not? We're not seeing that AI is generating. Who is creating the conversations that this thing, the data set that's being used. I think that there are really interesting ways in which the auto tuning will make us see things about the content we produce that we should think about.
Yeah, you make a good point there, because like going to like what you said about like individual experiences, like a lot of times too, like when like styles come up, it's because like someone like had such a like unique introduction to like art or music or something like that. So yeah, it's a good point that like with AI you don't really have that same kind of like situation.
You ask someone to produce a 19th century painting or sculpture. Let's make it a sculpture. It can go on the 3D printer.
Yep.
I guarantee that like 95% of the data set's going to be white guys, many of whom had access to educations that were well documented, because it's all going to be about what got documented. And
survivorship bias.
A lot of the problems that we're working very hard to rectify. There we go. It was really interesting talking to you. You know, I'm not a specialist in this at all, but it was interesting to muse on these topics. And my takeaway is that I don't want to be too conservative and unwilling to allow these things to happen. But I also think that so much of what museums have done in the past and has been irresponsible. Like we're being reminded of having taken things as an imperialist culture and a colonialist culture. And I think that AI has the potential to just be a different kind of imperialism and colonialism in terms of intellectual and creative output. So not against it. I just want to be responsible about it.
Of course.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate your perspective on everything.